His last request was made as he was standing in the darkened courtroom, surrounded by chilly stares and the burden of his previous errors. He wanted to see his dog one last time, so he silenced everyone. What happened next would forever alter not only his life, but also the lives of everyone who saw it. The atmosphere was charged with tension of the sort that made every paper, shuffling, and coughing sound reverberate across the expansive area for years Jack Reynolds had been in the heart of. Once a revered man in his little town, he was accused of sobbing, which led to a flurry of scandal and betrayal. He had lost his dignity and was now simply a shell of the man who had been his lone friend in his hometown. Titan's devoted Labrador Retriever was a constant during those trying years. Source of solace in the middle of the storm, the courtroom was a judgmental space with faces waiting to see Jack's. Reporters scrawled frantically to document every detail of the trial that had enthralled the country, but fate sealed. Jack stood there and made a plea that no one had ever heard before, his voice calm despite the tremor in his hands. Before this sentence, he started to stare at the judge, expecting her honor. "Is fulfilled, but I would like to see Titan, my dog, one final time." Even the judge, who was a grim figure, was intrigued by the murmur that echoed through the courtroom at that moment. Who seldom showed emotion, leaned forward a little, and showed interest in a puppy he asked in a doubtful tone. "Yes," Jack confirmed his eyes. "Titan has always supported me, so he deserves a befitting send-off." The crowd went quiet, and the severity of the accusations against Jack was momentarily obscured by his humanity in his plea. No longer was it about guilt or innocence. Rather, it was about a man's last relationship with the entity that had never condemned him. Everyone in attendance was unaware that Jack's plea would set off a chain of events. That none could have predicted Titan was not your typical dog, and that their reunion would reveal facts that had been buried for years, changing the story of Jack Reynolds' life and the lives of those around him forever. Only 5 years ago, he was the pride of Meadowbrook, a little, charming town, but he's always been a guy accused of crimes. Located at the base of the Rockies, Jack founded a local charitable organization that helped rescued animals. Adored character who frequently organizes adoption events at the community center or walks Titan through the local square. He had an idyllic life that seemed almost too beautiful to be true, but behind the scenes started to fall apart after a reliable coworker accused him of embezzling money intended for the nonprofit, claiming that Jack had embezzled thousands of dollars into offshore accounts. The evidence was blatantly fraudulent, including fake signatures, business records, and invoices that overnight Jack immediately linked to him. Transitioned from hero to pariah, rejected by the community he had served. Yet Titan remained his unwavering. Buddy, the Labrador, had been rescued years before Jack had, having been discovered as a shaky puppy on the side of the road. Nursed him back to health, and even after friends and neighbors abandoned Jack, their relationship remained unshakable. Titan was there for him, providing silent solace during the restless nights of anxiety and regret over the trial. Prosecutors were quick to characterize Jack as a ruthless opportunist who had violated his community's trust for his own benefit. And in spite of Jack's claims of innocence, his defense fell apart under. Financial specialists validated the incriminating paper trail and the weight of the evidence presented by witnesses who testified against him. Even his closest supporters turned against him after the judge found him guilty and sentenced him to life in prison. The trial in prison served as his last stage, where all facets of his life had been examined, and the room appeared divided as he stood there making his strange plea, and everyone were judging him. Sam brushed it off as a pathetic tactic, but others couldn't help but feel sorry for the man who had lost everything, and the judge's cautious attitude is extremely unusual. "Ms. Reynolds, please," he replied, taking off his glasses and setting them on the bench. "But considering the situation and the seriousness of the punishment, I'll permit it. Your dog will be brought here." Jack's shoulders slumped in relief under close supervision. It was a minor triumph, but it meant the world too. After making the necessary preparations, Titan was taken to the courthouse the next day to see the dogtail. For a brief while, the audience gasped as he wailed wildly as he entered the room, hardening. Guards and spectators' faces softened as they observed the devoted Labrador tugging frantically at his leash. Jack knelt down to approach his owner, his hands shaking as they touched Titan's fur. As he muttered, "Hey buddy, I missed you so much." Tears were streaming down his face. Titan licked Jack's face and gave a faint growl, his tail moving even more quickly. There was a tangible connection between the two, a rare instance of unadulterated emotion that eased the tension in the room. But then an unforeseen event occurred. Titan started sniffing Jack carefully as he drew nearer, rubbing his nose against. The dog's attitude changed as his movements became more purposeful, and Jack, who was concentrated, saw the slight change and scowled, wondering what was wrong with Titan the dog. Titan's handler turned to the judge's bench and gave a harsh bark, shocking everyone in the room. Control, but the Labrador refused to move. He barked once more, his gaze fixed on the judge's desk. The courtroom muttering became more intense, and the confusion spread like wildfire. "Is there a?" The judge inquired about the dog's issue, and the handler's voice was tinged with annoyance. "I'm not sure." He pulled at. Despite Titan's leash, the dog would not move, and his barking became more persistent. Jack's eyes immediately landed on a tiny glimmer of light bouncing off Titan's collar, which initially appeared to an ordinary tag, but Jack saw that it wasn't concealed among Titan's collar folds when he looked more closely. Jack's heart pounded as he grabbed for a small metallic object that was hardly perceptible unless you were looking for it. Jack swiftly brushed his fingertips across what turned out to be a USB drive that had been deftly hidden inside the collar's lining. Pocketed the gadget, his mind whirling with inquiries about why and by whom it had been installed. Was it concealed on Titan? And more significantly, what secrets did it hold about the dog's abrupt behavioral change? Since Titan had been attempting to convey something significant without his knowledge, he wasn't merely pleased to meet him. This tiny gadget had the power to transform everything for everyone in the room. It wasn't only a sign of hope for Jack. The opportunity to establish his innocence and learn the truth about the betrayal that had ruined his life was a lifeline. For the first time in years, Jack's mind was anything but quiet as the courtroom returned to an uncomfortable hush. He had a glimmer of hope after Titan, his devoted friend, gave him motivation to fight back in the holding. So Jack sat by himself, examining his USB disk with shaking hands. The small gadget felt heavier than it should have, so he took it from Titan's collar and turned it over in his fingers. Jack couldn't overlook the careful preparation that must have gone into concealing it, even though it was hard to know what it contained. Titan had been the courier, and someone had traveled great distances to make sure he got it. Jack's mind began to spin. Could this drive be related to his case? Was it a lifeline holding, or was it evidence that was fabricated to further frame him? He could not afford to hope naively, yet the very fact that the gadget was there filled with a mixture of fear and cautious hope. "Reynolds, you have a guest." Jack looked up, startled to see that the guard had interrupted his thoughts with a bark. Became rare after his conviction. The guard escorted him to a private room where his lawyer, ARS, was waiting for him. Claire Monroe, a fiery young attorney who had taken on Jack's case pro gratis and was keen to establish his. CLA Jack welcomed her with a feeble smile, saying, "I didn't expect to see you," despite the overwhelming amount of evidence against him. "I learned about your unique request in court today, and CLA stated that you raised an eyebrow, and I learned of Titan's situation." Jack paused, uncertain of how to. When he eventually leaned in and lowered his voice, "I discovered how much he could safely share." CLA's eyes widened as she picked up the USB disk he had taken out of his pocket and slid across the table. Jack clarified, "I don't know who placed the gadget in Titan's collar. Where did it originate? Or why? But I feel that it's crucial that CLA studies the drive because her mind is already racing. If this has anything to do with your case, we must determine what is on it. But we must use caution because if it is evidence, we must." Jack remarked in an urgent tone, "Can you check it? Handle it by the book, or it could be dismissed in court." "I'll," Claire said, "see what I can do, but accessing it may be difficult if the person who planted this took the time to." Jack nodded, "And they probably encrypted it as well. Whatever it takes." CLA's mind was racing with questions when she returned to her office later that evening, because she needed to know the truth. Partially anticipated that the USB drive would just contain the screen when she plugged it to her protected laptop. Her breath hitched when she opened the first document. which was full of folders with mysterious titles on them. It wasn't only financial information, which included a thorough record of all transactions, timestamps, and correspondence between high-level. The data presented a terrible image to the nonprofit board members, but not of Jack, demonstrating a concerted attempt by multiple board members to pilfer money and place the blame on Jack when email exchanges exposing cold calculations outlining how to fake were discovered during an audit that threatened to expose their operations. While she perused the files, CLA's heart raced with proof against Jack, and a guarantee his guilt wasn't merely evidence of exoneration. Rather, it was a full-fledged conspiracy. However, the most startling revelation was CLA clicked on a video file titled Jack with trembling hands. The video started in a dimly lit room with a man on screen, his face hidden by shadows. Jack's voice then started. If you're viewing this, it indicates Titan delivered the drive as scheduled. It's distorted to hide the speaker's identity. We're set up by those you trusted, and this proof will demonstrate it. But be aware that they are observing you, and you will need to move swiftly and carefully to reveal the truth. CLA froze, the gravity of the situation weighing on whoever had put it together. Insider knowledge of the plot was evident in this film, so why hadn't they come forward themselves? Decided to put the onus of telling Jack the truth on him, Claire started, taking all necessary precautions to safeguard the evidence. She downloaded and encrypted the files because she couldn't risk the data. Jack waited eagerly in his cell for news when CLA eventually arrived the following day, fearing that he would be tracked down or interfered with. She responded, "You were right," with a triumphant yet urgent face. "Everything we need to demonstrate your innocence is in a folder on the table between them on this drive. Financial." Jack's breath caught on the video and on the records. "Are you serious?" Claire acknowledged that this may clear my name. However, this goes beyond simply clearing your name. The individuals who framed you are strong, and they, Jack questioned, the glimmer of optimism in his eyes dimming, won't let this information come to light without a fight. Claire's hushed voice and the seriousness of her remarks indicate that we must be strategic. They can hide their traces if we move too quickly, but if we wait too long, they might discover we have this. Proof. I'll begin constructing a case, but you must be ready because it won't be simple. Jack nodded the weight of the. Despite the obstacles that lay ahead, he felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in years thanks to Titan's loyalty. He had a fighting chance because of his will and the mysterious drive. The atmosphere in the courtroom was heavy with. Jack's feelings fluctuated between relief and fear as he awaited his return to his cell because of the evidence CLA had uncovered was a breakthrough, but it also presented additional dangers because the individuals who set him up were strong, and exposing them would endanger Titan and CLA, who had been imprisoned for years. Feeling helpless, but with the stakes bigger than ever, CLA dug deeper into the documents from the. She painstakingly cataloged every document on the USB stick, cross-referencing dates, emails, and bank transactions. The more she looked into them, the more people she discovered, exposing a broad plot that went well beyond the organization. The board members who set Jack up were linked to a network of corruption that included well-known people, and as the hours passed by, it became evident that this was a systemic operation with government contracts. Her heart skipped a beat when her phone buzzed with a text message from a blocked number. "Stop digging, this isn't your fight." Looked about her office and became acutely aware of her surroundings. Were they observing her? And if so, how did they know? Entailed taking a deep breath and overcoming the dread, because she was aware of this type of, if anything, the intimidation that came with the territory proved that she was headed in the correct direction in spite of the CLA's warning. Choosing to move further, she enlisted Lucas G., a reputable IT expert, to examine the encryption and confirm its legitimacy if they were to show this in court. Each piece of. As he worked on the data, Lucas said, "This isn't just amateur-level encryption. The evidence had to withstand inspection. The person who performed this was an expert. They wanted to safeguard this information at all costs." "Can we?" Claire leaned over Lucas' shoulder and questioned. "Trace, who made it?" Lucas shook his head, saying, "There's no way they covered their tracks too. However, I can assure you that this information is reliable and was taken straight from internal sources." Servers as Jack sat by himself in his cell, his thoughts racing about Titan's part in. Delivering the USB disk was replayed in his mind. During the chaos, the devoted dog had been his one consistency, and now, although Titan had given him a chance, there were still unanswered concerns about who had planned this and why they had selected him to bear the responsibility of revealing the truth, and more significantly, how far would. As they sat across from one another, the conspirators went to silence him, and the following morning, CLA came to Jack with updates. She also described the extent of the plot, saying that it's no longer just about you. CLA started by naming the individuals who framed. You are a part of something far larger. They had been using shell corporations to transfer funds while fabricating paperwork and utilizing charity donations for private benefit. If we expose this, we won't only clear your name, we'll reveal a network of corruption. Jack reclined in his chair, unable to comprehend the magnitude of her remarks. What is the strategy? I have begun constructing the case that CLA stated, but we must be cautious. These individuals have connections and resources, and if they feel threatened, they will pursue us. Let's make. Jack responded, I'm sure they don't see it coming, sharpening his voice. CLA agreed. We'll need to move in. Phase 1. I'll work with a third party to secure the evidence before contacting a reliable investigative journalist. While CLA tried to secure the evidence, Jack started to gather. The narrative will still be publicized even if something were to happen to us. Observe how the jail guards, who had previously disregarded him, were now paying more attention. Every time Holt walked up to the yard, it appeared to him that the talks there had drawn attention to his court motion. Unwelcome attention. One afternoon, Jack was pulled aside by a fellow prisoner named Red, who was renowned for his keen perception. Reynolds, Red forewarned you in a quiet voice that certain persons on the. Jack nodded, acknowledging the warning, but I don't like the ruckus you're creating outside. You better watch your back. He had endured the daily grind of prison life for years, refusing to display fear. In the meantime, CLA's attempts to get in touch with her journalist friend Sophie were resisted. Sophie was interested in the story, but cautious about the dangers if this is as large as you claim. CLA. Sophie warned over the phone that you're placing yourself in danger, so you should be certain you can. CLA said, handle the fallout. I have no choice. Jack's life hinged on this, as well as the lives of all the other people they have harmed. Sophie sighed. Send me what you have, and I'll look at it, but CLA made no promises since they understood that getting Sophie to run the article was only half the fight. Tangible evidence. And even if the USB drive had a lot of it, she needed to connect the dots between the conspirators and the evidence. That required figuring out how to link the documents to particular choices and actions taken by the board members as CLA and Sophie planned Jack's surprise visit from Mike, a retired K-9 officer and Titan's old trainer. Jack became suspicious when the trainer appeared out of the blue, but Mike's cool head immediately calmed him down. I heard. Mike, who was seated across from Jack in the visitors section, mentioned that Titan's dog was usually unique, but I didn't believe he would ever be involved in something similar. Jack remarked, getting right to the point. Why are you here? I came to tell you. Titan wasn't acting instinctively. Someone had prepared him for this and knew just how to approach you. Do you know who Mike shook his head at? Jack's heart was pounding. I have a. CLA's initial sense of comfort over their accomplishment was fleeting, as we will soon learn. The deeper, the more she and Sophie examined the information, the more complex the corruption's network seemed to be. The nonprofit wasn't merely a front for financial wrongdoing. It was connected to bigger, riskier organizations that had a significant impact that appeared to have been embezzlement. But sinister CLA's investigation led her to a series of numerous transactions involving anonymous offshore accounts connected to businesses that weren't formally recognized, using shell companies to conceal illegal activities. The money trail revealed connections to organized crime and perhaps. Late one evening, CLA sat in on federal contractors who were exploiting the organization as a laundering device. She was looking through financial records in her poorly lit flat when Sophie called her out of the blue. The names on these documents are among the urgent things, Sophie said. Belongs to a governmental contractor. If we link this to them, they provide the government with surveillance equipment. We're examining classified operations and the stomach of the company, not simply corporate fraud. Sophie coldly retorted. How classified are we talking enough to make people disappear if we're not careful? Red's cautions continued to loom large over Jack's circumstances while he was incarcerated, and it was impossible to avoid the guards' increased attention. During a regular inspection, one of them made a, "Be cautious, Reynolds. Some fights are bigger than you," the guard. That was a subliminal remark that made Jack shudder. Jack knew better than to respond to the barely audible murmur, but the message was obvious. That night, as his quest for justice was stirring up trouble in perilous areas, Jack was startled awake by cries in the guards had to leave the cell block because a fire had broken out in the far wing. As Jack observed the mayhem, the timing seemed too fortuitous for a number of prisoners. Unfold, he couldn't get rid of the impression that someone was communicating with everyone who shared his. CLA's circumstances outside of the prison were getting more unstable when she spotted strange cars parked close to her house and an increasing number of odd emails inexplicably. Her phone connection was frequently cutting out, files were corrupting, and it was obvious that someone was attempting to undermine her attempts and refused to let up. Claire went to Lucas for assistance. She gave him a hard drive with the most important evidence on it and stated, "Need a secure way to keep these files." Lucas nodded, his face grave, something they can't touch under any circumstances. As Lucas worked, CLA made the decision to take a break. They'll need a small army to crack this, so I'll set up redundancies and encryptions. Taking a calculated risk, she posted a mysterious statement about her discoveries on an anonymous whistleblower forum. Thought it would bring in allies who would offer more security, or at the very least raise awareness of their investigation. Sophie discovered another crucial piece of the jigsaw while CLA battled with outside threats. Found a connection between the board members of the charity organization and a mysterious individual going by the name Lazarus. Lazarus was a notorious someone who was skilled in suppressing whistleblowers and burying scandals. Sophie phoned CLA as soon as his name appeared in the records, confirming the magnitude of their challenge. CLA's blood raced cold as she mentioned that Lazarus was involved in our dilemma. Are you? If he's in encrypted communications connected to the nonprofit's offshore accounts, I'm convinced his name is in them. We're up against someone who has earned a living by stifling people like us, not simply a dishonest board. During mail call back in prison, Jack got an envelope with a picture inside. Jack became silent when he read the terrifying letter. "Don't let your dog become collateral damage," that was attached to Titan. Whoever delivered the fury had gone too far. Titan had endured enough. Jack folded the paper and put it in his pocket because he couldn't handle the thought of someone using him as leverage. Jack promised not to display his fear when CLA paid him a visit later that day. When she read the note, her face became pale, but she said in a forceful voice, "They're trying to intimidate us." Despite the increasing pressure, Claire and Sophie kept piecing together, but it won't work since we're too near to the truth. Using Lucas's assistance, they pieced together the evidence and encrypted a collection of files that showed a chronology of events leading to. The timeline of Jack's arrest revealed how the board members of the nonprofit organization had faked and altered public records. False witness statements and audits were damning evidence. Yet it still needed one essential component: a direct line of communication with the folks who work behind the scenes and are in severe need of solutions. Considered calling Mike Titan's former trainer again in the hopes that he could shed some light on how Titan got the USB drive to the courthouse when Mike got to her workplace. He brought a stack. Whoever planned this had extensive knowledge of Titan's capabilities and old training logs. Flipping through the files, Mike mentioned that Titan was trained for certain message delivery scenarios and traversing comp. Lex contacts were an A. Claire remarked, "Do you think you can trace who might have retrained him?" Mike nodded slowly, acknowledging that it would take some time. As things got more serious, Claire and Jack found themselves leaning on others for support. Unexpected sources, Titan's steadfast devotion and Jack's tenacity became symbols of hope for CLA, while Jack's sense of purpose was rekindled by CLA's resolve to fight for justice. CLA sat in her office as they decided to move forward together, no matter the cost. Late at night, gazing at the strewn-about papers and proof that depicted a terrifying image of corruption in the air, was burdened with unsaid anxieties. Yet Titan calmed himself at her feet in the middle of the commotion. serene manner that stood in sharp contrast to her mounting nervousness in spite of everything. The phone rang, interrupting their conversation, but the dog continued to provide a calm reassurance and a reminder of why they were arguing. Sophie said, "I just got off the line with a contact at the whistleblower forum," breaking the silence. "They have confirmed that Lazarus has been mobilized in a major way." Claire leaned forward, which indicates that they are aware of us, CLA. "We're no longer merely conducting an investigation. Lazarus doesn't get involved unless someone has rattled the wrong cages." For a brief minute, Claire, the word's weight was undeniable as they hung in the air, thought about retreating for Jack's and Titan's sake rather than hers. But secretly, while Jack sat by himself in his cage, she realized that retreat was not an option. The image of Titan gripping the message he had previously received flashed through his memory, like A. He was haunted by the idea of Titan being used as leverage. Red's words, "You've got more fight in you than you realize," replayed in his mind, making him feel angry and dreadful. Jack was hesitant to talk when the jail chaplain came by later that night. "Do you?" he said in a hushed voice. "I think some fights are bigger than us." The chaplain, an elderly guy with gentle eyes, nodded. "Of course, but it doesn't mean we're helpless. Sometimes the most heroic deeds are needed for the most significant battles." As Jack took in the information, he noticed a glimmer of insight amid his internal conflict. His battle wasn't only for himself. It was also for Titan, Claire, and the following day's truth. When Claire first saw Sophie and the individuals since the investigation started, they were seated opposite one another in A. As they spoke about their next course of action in the peaceful cafe, Sophie produced a fresh piece of evidence in the form of a series of encrypted communications that directly linked the NGO to government contracts. The ramifications were astounding and might reveal anything, Sophie said, dragging the printed emails across the table. "But if we do, we'll make a huge target out of ourselves." CLA reviewed the materials, and if we don't go back, her mind will be racing. "Use it. Jack is still incarcerated, and those responsible escape punishment." Sophie sighed as she reclined in her chair. "I understand, but we must be strategic. If we make a single mistake, they will bury us before we could do anything back at the prison." CLA was able to arrange for Jack to be taken to the visitation room for an unforeseen meeting. Organize a quick visit, understanding that it would not be possible to see Titan at this time. However, she brought news. Evidence. CLA began with a calm but urgent tone, stating that there is actual proof that connects everything. "But it's..." Jack looked at her, saying, "If we push too hard, they'll come after us. Resolutely do whatever it takes, Claire, and don't let them to win." Claire paused, then said, "I won't, but you must make me a promise to stay strong. We'll overcome this no matter what." Jack smiled slightly at her. Later that night, Sophie, "All the strength I need is Titan waiting for me on the other side," found a flaw in the system they were looking into, and one of the nonprofit's affiliated shell businesses had been negligently handled, leaving evidence of its ties to well-known people. Although the discovery was revolutionary, it presented a conundrum because revealing this link could hasten the inquiry, but it would also increase the dangers. Claire called Lucas to talk about their alternatives. She stated, "If we use this, we'll force their hand, but it..." Lucas remained silent for a while before answering, "Which is sometimes the only way to win. It might also force us into hiding. Is taking the greatest chance, so make sure you're prepared for what will happen next." As tensions increased, Titan started displaying strange behavior. He continuously pushed CLA's arm during one of their late-night meetings, drawing her attention to a file that she had forgotten included Jack's original handwritten note. It included information that matched the email Sophie had sent him when he initially thought he was being framed. CLA gazed at the message when it was discovered, providing a fuller image of the conspiracy. Titan's senses had once again guided her to a crucial piece of the puzzle. "Good boy," she said, her mind racing. "Despite the growing evidence, we will figure this out," he said, stroking his fur. CLA started to have doubts, so she confided in Sophie on a late-night phone call. "What if we're mistaken?" Sophie responded firmly, "We've come too far to stop, but this doesn't lead anywhere. Now, Jack is depending on us, Titan is counting on us. and you've always known the truth in your heart. CLA took A. After taking a deep breath to allow Sophie's comments to sink in, she understood that, in spite of the dangers, they were headed in the right direction. Fighting for justice for Jack, Titan, and everyone else who had been wronged was more important than simply finding the truth. When Claire woke up, she heard Sophie's frightened voice on the other end of her phone, which was CLA. As they know. What do you mean? I just got a message. Sophie. Lazarus has made its move. The words made CLA shudder. Clarified that it was unclear but obvious that you're too close to back off, and it's not. Last night, all of my laptop's information vanished. Saying tightened her fist. The threat was obvious, yet it just strengthened her resolve. We won't back down. Not at the prison right now, Jack. During his routine, Guard Reynolds handed him a note, and he felt the weight of the invisible battle that CLA and Sophie were engaged in. Make sure they're keeping an eye on me right now. Jack was aware of the consequences. The group of people who were rooting for him was getting smaller as Lazarus's inspection of every move and item of. The same morning, when CLA got an unmarked parcel at her door, Claire discovered proof that was compelling their adversaries to take action. There was a solitary USB disk and a note for Titan in the office. She gazed at it. Her thoughts were racing. Who sent it? And why should Titan be brought up against her? When CLA connected the drive to a separate system, she discovered startling and enlightening surveillance. Video that showed Jack and Titan from years ago, when Jack was employed by the organization. Among the exchanges between Jack and a number of board members who were later connected to Lazarus, one video stood out. Jack and Titan during a board meeting when the topic of Titan's search and rescue canine training was being discussed. Members appeared unduly intrigued by the dog's skills. CLA watched the film again and noticed a fleeting glance exchange. The knowledge that Titan had been singled out from the beginning, not merely as Jack's, struck her like a lightning bolt among them. Partner, but as a means of achieving their goal. CLA and Sophie met later that day too. Talking about their findings, Sophie paced the room and remarked, "This changes everything. Titan is an essential component of their operation and wasn't only collateral damage, but why?" When CLA inquired as to what they would like in a dog, Sophie paused to consider. CLA Titan was trained to monitor, perceive, and maneuver in order to identify anomalies. Complicated terrains. What if Lazarus was more interested in Titan's skills than merely Jack's work? The consequences of any clandestine activities, information smuggling, or even working as a courier were astounding. Titan was not just a devoted friend, but also a tool Lazarus sought to manipulate. Meanwhile, Jack had another guest. Red was his previous cellmate at the prison, but this time, Red's attitude was more calculating. "And I've been hearing stuff about Jack." He started. "You're causing trouble," but Jack didn't answer right away. "What do you want Red to warn you about?" Red said, "Lazarus doesn't. They will crush you and your companions if they believe you pose a threat, since they are as weak as Jack's jaw." Tightened. "So why are you telling me this red smirking thing? Sometimes even the worst." The cryptic words made Jack uncomfortable. Could Red be trusted, or was this just another ploy? Guys dislike the bigger bad guys. Claire and Sophie chose to contact their reliable cybersecurity contact, Paul P.A., when Lazarus cast out on them. Assistance with the USB drive analysis. Paul, a former hacker who is now an ethical consultant, has contacts that could delve further into Lazarus's activities. "This isn't a random drive," Paul stated following A. "These files' information indicates that they were accessed from a high-security server last week, which was sent by whoever." Claire remarked, "Do you think this is a trap? You had inside access to Lazarus." Paul said that while it's conceivable, there's also a chance that someone inside might be attempting to assist you. The stress increased when Claire got an encrypted email from an unidentified sender. The communication included comprehensive plans for a future Titan-related Lazarus operation. The blueprint said that. "This is crazy, Sophie." Lazarus planned to utilize Titan in a secret mission, using his skills to their advantage. Stated over CLA's shoulder that they are weaponizing Titan. CLA's blood boiled, not only framing Jack. They must be stopped because they can't get away with this. Late that evening, Claire and Titan sat together and browsed the. Titan put his head on her lap and displayed his composed demeanor while they collected evidence. Grounding her in the middle of the storm, She gazed into his eyes and felt a wave of determination come over her. Titan had been brave and devoted, unwavering. It was now her time to keep him safe. The phone rang, and it was Lucas. "We have a lead," he said. "Warehouse outside of town that is connected to Lazarus and corresponds with the address listed in the drawings. Thus, that's where." "Next," Claire responded in a firm voice. And the next day, CLA Sophie and Lucas, ready to explore the warehouse. They were aware of the danger, but they also understood that it might be their only opportunity to discover the truth about Titan's visits with Vigilant prior to their departure from CLA. Transmitted a communication to Jack over a reliable channel, saying, "We're close, Jack. Hold on tight." Jack read the message with a slight smile tugging at his lips for the first time. "I won't let them win in his cage." He had hoped for months as the deserted warehouse loomed on the edge of the city's corroded facade serves as a clear reminder of the secrets it kept CLA. Titan and Sophie Lucas approached warily, staying in the shadows. Their aim was to just infiltrate a document and remain unnoticed. But the uncertainty hung heavy in the air. Titan, alert, as always, took the lead with his keen. He stopped suddenly close to the side of the warehouse as their senses led them through the overgrown area surrounding it. Titan muttered, "What's it, boy?" as he sniffed closely at the door. Growl, his gaze fixed on the door, which is most likely guarded, Lucas said, drawing closer, "But we are unable to go back at this time." The hum of machinery and rows of computer servers filled the air, confirmed the warehouse's function as a Lazarus facility by blinking in the dim light. Sophie promptly set up a CLA advised her to use a portable scanner to quickly grab data from the network. Sophie's fingertips flew over the room as she replied, "Give me 5 minutes," her eyes searching for any movement. Titan's keyboard tightened abruptly, his ears twitching in response to a faint, far-off sound. As the shuffle reverberated around the empty room, so a gesture for Lucas to look into it while she and Titan remained concealed in order to protect Sophie as Lucas proceeded farther inside the warehouse. Spotted an adjacent chamber with crates with the Lazarus sign. Carefully opening one, he noticed a variety of electronic gadgets, ranging from tools for encrypted communication to surveillance equipment, because they're operating a whole. He whispered, taking pictures for proof, then returned to the main server, where Sophie's countenance brightened. These 5 FES described their future goals in a voice that was hardly audible above a whisper. "Look, there's a Titan CLA's schedule, which included times, had her gut knot as she perused the document. Tasks and locations that all entail moving Titan across facilities. We're running out of time." Titan roared again, and she added, her voice shaking, "They're planning to use him tomorrow." A louder voice was drawing CLA's attention to the entryway, and several pairs of Sophie's footsteps were getting closer. "We must move, CLA. I'm almost done," Sophie murmured hurriedly, and she continued to focus on Drew's footfall. Lucas reappeared, his countenance grim, accompanied by muted voices. "Security patrol," he replied, "and they're going this way." "Time's up," CLA seized Sophie's arm and shouted, "We must leave now." The group proceeded quickly, but the exit was no longer visible. Guards had entered the warehouse, and Titan took the lead as their flashlights pierced the darkness. His knowledge was vital as he led the group down a different route toward the rear escape, warning them of Titan's ability to evade detection and conceal cameras is amazing, Lucas muttered. Claire nodded slightly as she watched the dog make its way through the dangerous terrain. Titan's delight, filling her heart, was more than just guiding them to safety. He was their ray of hope and protector. As they arrived at the exit, a loud yell resounded. When the guard saw them passing through the warehouse stop, CLA and Lucas paused, protecting Sophie as she held the data drive tightened tightly and positioned himself between the group and the oncoming soldiers, growling in protection. Despite the anxiety, Lucas replied in a steady voice, "We're out of options." With a harsh order, Claire said, "We're not," keeping her eyes on Titan. Titan launched himself into action, darting toward the soldiers with deliberate and accurate movements. The distraction was sufficient to create an opening, CLA yelled, dragging Sophie and Lucas to the exit. Titan came back a little while later. Despite the anxiety, his tail was wagging, and the guards were confused but undamaged, giving the gang just enough time to. Sophie plugged the drive into a secure laptop and exclaimed, "This is big," as they fled into the night back to their safe place. Glancing through the papers, these intentions aren't limited to Titan. Lazarus operates in several places. Titan, dogs, dolphins, and falcons are among the creatures they use in their plans. CLA's voice was filled with disgust as she continued. They're taking advantage of them for power and money. Titan isn't. He is a part of something far more than simply a pawn in their game. And as they absorb the facts, CLA get a call from Guard Reynolds. Jack stated in an anxious tone that he is in danger and that they are transferring him to A. CLA's mind raced as the Titan time frame was shutting, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to get in touch with him tomorrow in the high security wing. Was planned, Jack was being segregated, and their evidence was still lacking. So, we must move quickly, she continued. Titan slept next to CLA and said, "If we don't stop Lazarus now, we might never get another chance." She put a hand on his head as his gaze scanned the room, finding solace in his steady presence. "We're going to get through this," she whispered to you that Jack and I spent the remainder of the night coming up with a strategy to use the evidence they had to attack the core of Lazarus's operations. Came together to reveal the group, but first they needed to keep Titan and Jack safe. The stakes were higher than ever, and the morning air was thick with excitement as CLA, Sophie, and Lucas got ready to carry out their strategy. They hoped that every little detail had been taken into account and every possible risk had been taken into account. As they went over their plan one last time, Vigilance seems to sense the tension still near CLA. Their goal was to intercept the transportation schedule and deliver Titan to a Lazarus facility at the same time. Would achieve Jack's release from the prison by using the evidence Sophie found to thwart Lazarus's larger operations. It was a two-pronged mission that needed flawless timing. Security wing. Sophie started the first phase by breaking into Lazarus' internal systems from a distance. "I'm in," she stated. "I'm putting up signal interference because her fingers are flying across the keyboard, which should cause a delay in there." Lucas, who was stationed close to the transport route, waited in utter stillness while we communicated long enough to move CLA. Titan was sitting next to CLA, and as he heard vehicles approaching, his ears perked up. Two black SUVs surrounded a van, and Lucas muttered, his hand clenching over the binoculars, "The stillness they're here." CLA took a long breath to calm herself when she saw everyone in the center wearing Lazarus's insignia. "Remember, Titan is our top priority," she added in a strong voice, and Lucas nodded. As the convoy neared the assigned point, Lucas set up a temporary barricade and positioned himself to stop it. The convoy was forced to stop by a deliberately placed fallen tree and debris, so the guards cautiously left and scanned the. CLA whispered, "This is the area for threats," and Titan, the dog, ran into it. With precision, he darted toward the valve, avoiding the guards and making it to the rear of. Titan encountered another vehicle within the truck without anyone noticing. The guard, who was obviously unprepared for the German Shepherd Titan's unexpected arrival, froze and growled softly. Titan started hurling at the van's path when his presence was sufficient to scare the guard into backing off. Lucas made a distraction by using a signal CLA had taught him to operate a door handle outside. CLA took advantage of the moment to divert the guard's focus from the van and moved swiftly and silently toward her. She discovered a deeply sedated Titan impersonator inside a decoy designed to fool anyone after them when she opened the van's doors. Claire mumbled, her rage brewing. The real Titan is trying to hide their tracks. She swiftly released the dog and swapped it out for a gadget Sophie had made that would monitor the van's movements and send there. Discussions with the team in the interim, as Sophie dealt with her own obstacle, Lazarus. "I need more time," she added in a voice that indicated they had discovered her infiltration into their system and were trying to block her. Tense as she tried to keep things under control, because her meddling was the only thing that mattered. Lucas stated on the radio that we were stopping Lazarus from calling for reinforcements to the convoy hold on Sophie. As if the assignment were routine, Titan almost immediately returned to Soleil's side, his tail bouncing, and Claire gave him a short pat. Lucas, the convoy, was not informed before they withdrew into the woods to regroup. The squad had successfully recovered the decoy when the swap continued its journey. However, As they examined the materials Sophie had obtained, CLA stated that the threat was far from finished. If Lazarus was employing decoys earlier, they were concealing something much more significant. Must determine Sophie's continued connection to Lazarus's pieced-together network in order to determine where the actual Titan is expected to travel. Bits of information, a secondary facility that is unregistered and hidden is where Jack is being kept there, and she said, "They're taking him," with a pale face. The gang was chilled by the revelation that the secondary facility was well defended, making it practically impossible to breach without drawing notice. So if we don't take action right once, we'll lose them both. CLA stated that her resolve was hardening. Features Lucas nodded. "Let's complete it." Sophie worked. "We've come this far. Disabling the facility surveillance systems as soon as possible will limit your window of chance." "Yes." She cautioned that after about 15 minutes, they would be aware of your presence. As they got closer to the complex, the anxiety was tightened since the presence of armed guards patrolling the expansive facility, which was encircled by tall barriers. The seriousness of the situation remained near CLA while he looked about the area. Lucas led the gang by exploiting the diversion Sophie produced to turn off the gate's electronic lock, moved swiftly but cautiously inside, and Titan's training once again paid off when he warned them of concealed cameras and led them via a maze of hallways and locked rooms, which was the facility's safest route. As they looked for Jack, CLA's pulse raced, and after what seemed like a lifetime, Titan led them to A. His actions validated their suspicions that Jack was behind the tightly guarded door, and Lucas had prepared A. He handed Claire a spare weapon and stated, "We only get one shot at this." He used an improvised smoke device to confuse the guards. Behind me, the plan was carried out with military precision, and the smoke that gave CLA caught the guards off guard. And Lucas had enough time to break through the door, where they saw Jack bound. But when he saw Claire and Titan, his countenance brightened. "Let's leave now." CLA's voice was firm, and Jack nodded, too feeble to say anything, but it was obvious that Lucas was relieved. And Titan stood watch while Claire assisted him in standing up, and the party made their way back through the building to make their getaway. "They can tell we're here because of the distant alarms, which makes it more difficult." Lucas stated that we must relocate. Titan took the initiative, following his gut to guide them to a different exit. Despite the commotion, the squad was able to escape just. The excitement of the escape as reinforcements arrived and vanished into the thick woodland encircling the facility had hardly calmed down when Titan, CLA, Lucas, and Sophie gathered in a secret safe. Jack, feeble but alive, was leaning on a makeshift cot at a house deep in the jungle. His eyes met Soleil's as he replied, "Thank you," his voice barely above a whisper. While Lucas strengthened the region where CLA turned her focus and Sophie attempted to bandage Jack's wounds, I felt like I would never be able to leave. To the next difficulty, the document Sophie had previously discovered showed the facility's broader function as a sprawling Lazarus's network of covert operations, of which the dog decoy they had saved was only one part. Sophie stated in her tone that the larger sinister mystery isn't simply about Titan or Jack. Animals like Titan are being used by Lazarus to transport encrypted data between the black market. CLA gazed at the system that government contractors and buyers had developed, which is now almost impossible to trace. Screened the rage and resolve that are simmering inside of her. If we can reveal this, we can halt them permanently, but we require more than what we currently have. Sophie nodded the data. "We need the master key to bring them down, but the information we recovered is sufficient to start an investigation." Lucas, standing close to the window, spoke out as he returned to their main servers to retrieve the encryption method that was stored there. CLA agreed, but the facility is suicidal, and they will be on high watch after tonight. Remained unwavering. "If we give up now, Lazarus will hide their tracks, and the entire operation would have been for nothing," Jack said in a raspy voice, adding that they won't anticipate you striking again so quickly. Benefit. With the arrangement in place, Sophie would remotely mentor CLA Lucas. Jack stayed behind to recover, while Titan entered Lazarus's central facility. It was a high-risk, high-reward situation. Claire knelt next to Titan while the squad prepped, leaving no space for error. She replied quietly, "You've done so much, buddy," while petting his fur, "but I need." Titan gave a deep, comforting growl. "Can you do this one more time?" Steadfast devotion. The establishment was a stronghold of cutting-edge technology, and every corridor was patrolled by armed security personnel, and surveillance drones hovered over Sophie's interference bee. Them valuable seconds to avoid checkpoints, but there was a very small margin of error. "CLA, there's a maintenance." Sophie's voice cracked through their earpieces on shaft 20 meters to your left. "It's not protected, but the cameras will return to the internet in 45 seconds. CLA and Lucas moved quickly, Titan trailing behind them. The shaft led to a large data center in the core of the building, which housed Lazarus's encrypted files. Sophie led them to the server room when they arrived at the data center, where the encryption key is kept on a physical. She clarified that the device most likely strikes a safe area close to the mainframe. "Search for a red access panel." Titan's keen. CLA swiftly disassembled the panel once his nose touched against it, and his senses guided them to it, exposing a sleek, shining gadget inside. "Got it," she muttered, but an alarm sounded across the building as she unlocked the gadget, alerting them to your presence. Sophie added, "It's vital that you." Guards started to swarm the area, their radios buzzing with orders to move. Titan sensed the threat and ordered Lucas to throw a smoke grenade to provide cover. But their escape route was closing quickly. Led the group through a maze of hallways until they arrived at an emergency exit, which was blocked off. Lucas stated in a strained voice, "We need another way out. We don't have time to go back." Titan can squeeze through the air vent that CLA saw above, and she suggested he can bring the device to Sophie. Lucas paused, "But what about us?" CLA's jaw clenched, seemingly holding them away from Titan. Claire connected the gadget to his harness and gave him a last order in order to make him realize how serious the situation was. "Go, Titan. Locate Sophie." The German Shepherd paused for a second before. The soldier's footsteps echoed down the hallway as they leaped into the vent and vanished into the darkness. Using a barricade and the remaining smoke grenades, CLA and Lucas got ready to make their stand in order to purchase Titan. Lucas stated that when the odds were against us, CLA couldn't help but smile. "Smirk, you're always the optimist." The ensuing firefight was furious and fierce, but Claire and Lucas held their ground, but it was obvious that they wouldn't be able to hold out much longer. Sophie's voice broke as their ammunition ran out. Titan said, "I have the device. I'm decrypting." Through the static, Claire felt a wave of comfort from the files, but it was brief because the guards were reassembling and their reinforcements were approaching. Claire looked at Lucas, and they both acknowledged in silence that we would probably be captured. "So we did what we arrived to do," what Claire thought was important. Lucas agreed and allowed them. Claire and Lucas prepared for the inevitable as the guards barged into the room, their assignment completed. But their future was uncertain. The courtroom's tense silence was broken as the prosecution got ready to make its final remarks made against Claire and Lucas, who were now charged with spying and trespassing. Despite the fact that their actions inside Lazarus' factory had disrupted production and cost the corporation millions, CLA and Lucas stayed. Without Lazarus or the court knowing, they remained unflappable and obstinate. Behind the scenes, Sophie had been working nonstop to decipher the data from the gadget Titan was carrying. Disclosed much more than they had expected. Lazarus's encrypted information network not only linked them to data manipulation and business espionage, but also revealed a high-ranking Singh conspiracy. Sophie meticulously pieced together the official documents and large corporations day and night. Titan, ever devoted, remained at her side, as if feeling the evidence and compiling it into a thorough report. The day of the trial had come, and Sophie was prepared with unquestionable evidence of Lazarus's corruption arrived in the courtroom with Jack at his side, who had recovered enough to walk resolutely, carrying a USB disk and a file full of documents. Titan trotted next to her, his presence a sign of the encrypted secrets Lazarus had attempted to conceal. "Loyalty and truth," the spectators murmured. "Isn't that the dog someone?" When he appeared in the courtroom, Claire and Lucas, who were seated at the defensive table, exchanged a look that was packed with hopefully, the judge, a severe individual who didn't tolerate much showmanship, called. The prosecutor opened the meeting by using their standard rhetoric to portray CLA and Lucas as reckless vigilantes who threatened lives. But Sophie rose up and respectfully addressed the court before they could continue. According to her, Your Honor, what my colleagues did was not only justified but also essential. Her voice was calm and resolute. I have evidence that Lazarus has been committing crimes on a never-before-seen magnitude. She gave the decoded documents that walked the court through Lazarus's activities, including each piece of twisted and false evidence. Document and each dishonest transaction was exposed, leaving the crowd in disbelief. Quiet while Sophie demonstrated how Lazarus had used creatures like Titan to transport. Claire and Lucas watched with hope as their operations were concealed by encrypted data, rekindled as Sophie deftly undermined the prosecution's case, even if the judge was first dubious. Looking through the documents Sophie gave with curiosity, the turning point was reached when Sophie aired an audio of a dialogue between two senior officials taken from Lazarus's own encrypted files. Executives publicly outlining their plans and the steps they take to stifle any critics. Unquestionable evidence that Sophie said not only my client's conduct were acceptable, but they also discovered The court ordered a pause so they could withdraw to their chambers and evaluate the plot that put many lives in peril. The proof during the break-in became the focus of attention, and his kind manner that disarmed even the room's most seasoned skeptics. Claire knelt next to him and whispered, You've done. The atmosphere during the court's reconvening was revealed by you, youngster. With gravity, the judge handed down their decision, and it is evident from the evidence that since the defendants' acts were valiant rather than illegal, the court finds Claire and Lucas not guilty. Burst into applause, but the judge wasn't done, and I'm also directing There must be a federal probe into Lazarus and its activities because CLA and Lucas cannot tolerate this degree of corruption. Sophie stood close to her as they embraced, tears of relief running down their faces. Normally composed, Jack broke into a victorious smile and joined them, putting a helping hand on Clark. Titan sensed the collective joy and exclaimed, Shoulder, you did it. A jubilant yelp caused the courtroom to erupt in laughter, releasing tension in a moment of humanity. Even the judge couldn't help but smile as he said, It appears that we owe this amazing dog outside The team was met outside the courthouse by a crowd of fans, journalists, and animal advocates who were motivated by the Titans. CLA's part in revealing the truth was to kneel next to him again and place her hands on either side of his face. Titan, she said, more than a hero. As the Lazarus probe progressed, the company's whole network of high-ranking executives were jailed, corruption was destroyed, and the facility where Jack had been detained was permanently ended. The CLA Lucas Sophie and Titan narrative, which became a symbol of justice, bravery, and the unique connection between people and animals. In the months that followed, the group founded a charity devoted to exposing corruption and supporting. Titan became the emblem for animal welfare, and his tale encouraged others to stand up for what's right despite the consequences. As the sun sank on the courtroom steps, the world saw the Titan's story was entwined with the strength of loyalty, bravery, and the enduring relationship between humans and animals. Claire, Lucas, Sophie, and Jack's unwavering quest for justice served as evidence of the great bravery required to oppose corruption. If this story touched you, just think of all the undiscovered tales that await discovery if you subscribe to our channel. You become a part of a community that is committed to investigating the amazing relationships that exist between people and the creatures that influence our lives in unfathomable ways. What aspect of this tale spoke to you the most? Most people leave a remark underneath, participate in the conversation, and tell their friends about this video. Don't forget to hit the notify button, relatives, and anybody else who believes in the power of truth and the charm of animals. Bell, so you never miss another heartwarming tale that will uplift your soul. Let's commemorate the animal and human heroes who serve as a constant reminder of the power of compassion and the unwavering pursuit of justice. We appreciate your time and hope to see you in the next inspirational story.